Um, I will pop it over to Austin. Tell us how you integrate new members.
Sure. So I think when I think about how Richmond has developed its processes of onboarding new members, a lot of it is about putting things into practice, right? Seeing what has worked and what hasn't. We've developed we've experienced with a couple of different models, I should say, as far as membership onboarding, right? We experimented with various times with a mobilizer system, right? A mobilizer system that is, phone banking members, kind of like Andrea was referring to, and we've experienced an amount of success with that. I think something that I often try to emphasize is that, or something I try to emphasize at the chapter, is that one of the best ways to, onboard new members is to, get them something they can be involved in, right? People want something they can sink their teeth into. People want to help. It always makes me sad whenever we have like a bylaws meeting and there's like 10 new people, and it's just like, well, it was going to be a long one. So it's always good to balance those things out, right? And I think I'd say Richmond got to a fairly good place pre-pandemic as far as onboarding because of our membership committee. Probably the most success we ever had with onboarding new people was having a committee literally dedicated to that, right? The membership committee, so to speak, right? The committee devoted to engaging with the membership, a committee devoted to holding new member orientation meetings, right? We were getting to a place where we were having regular new member orientation meetings that were getting pretty good turnout as well. And I think, outreach committee, that's what I meant to say, the outreach committee, these words. Anyway, words are a thing, aren't they? But yeah, the outreach committee, they would oversee these membership orientation calls, and they were going pretty well for a while. We also have a chapter Discord, right? Chapter Discords are fun, giving an opportunity for members to get onboarded into the Discord so that they can actually meet other members and engage with other members. And once again, this is something we were hitting our stride with pre-pandemic. As the pandemic has been an absolute motherfucker for all of us, it's definitely has been a pain in the ass. Now I think once again we're beginning to get to a better place to where we can get into those processes more regularly. But I go back to that principle, right? Giving people something to sink their teeth into. Right now, obviously, you don't want to overwhelm new members, right? You don't need to be, quoting the most obscure thing like immediately, right? Political education is, of course, also a major aspect of that. But yeah, I think that's a good principle to have, and specifically making sure that there are people doing that sort of work. Only because I referenced earlier, we had a decent mobilizer team in Richmond, and we had some success with it. It was like there were our current chapter chair was mobilized through the mobilizer program, so I guess that was effective. But I'd say the moment where we were able to really hit our stride was through that outreach committee that was specifically focused toward those sorts of events. And once again, just investing in not just our cadre membership, investing in our new membership as well, I think is particularly important.
Thank you so much, Austin. Shanti, can you give us some insight from San Francisco?
Yeah, ours is a little more, I don't want to say scattershot, actually. It's not the scattershot, it's quite deliberate, but we've gone through a lot of iterations, some of which have already been described here. So, we used to have, and we still will, but I think we used to have like a monthly new member meeting that was at the same bookstore in San Francisco in the Mission every month, right? So I think we like to lean into the social aspect a lot because I feel like we're a very socializey chapter, and I think like with COVID, that's gotten a little harder because, we're used to also even just hashing out our disagreements at the bar after the monthly general meeting, right? Like there's a lot of that aspect, which I don't think we realized, or at least I didn't, how much we really relied on in-person interaction as a chapter to hash out differences and build camaraderie and everything until it was gone, but we have those monthly meetings. We have had, and we're still having them via Zoom, where there's a lot of, we encourage a lot of like folks from every committee we want to make sure someone from every committee is there representing at least. But then we also have like additional folks there who are like longstanding members of the chapter. So it becomes like a good social opportunity, and then usually turns into a hangout after the meeting's over. So that's like the social entry point. As far as keeping people engaged, that's where we've kind of gone through a lot of different cycles, because big things like, for example, the anchor union mobilization, like that really gets people back in, or when people see us kind of out marching and stuff. So we've actually surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, gotten a lot of like, new membership or excitement about new membership when we're doing anti-fascist action, which I was like, yeah, I was a little surprised by that, but people like to see us out there, I guess, even though we weren't actively recruiting during that action. But yeah, I mean, we had a mobilizer committee, and that went well for a while. It's kind of like our cadence is like, things go well until they kind of don't, and then we just do something new. So we're still like we haven't really figured out a permanent recruitment solution as far as I know. But we had a mobilizer committee, right? And that was its own committee in the chapter. And then after that, we decided to kind of like, house, as the members who were dedicated to that committee started doing different things, we started to house the mobilizer in the committee. So we made it a committee position. And that actually has worked fairly well so far, because somebody's a dedicated mobilizer for each different like group that's meeting. So if you're electoral committee, they have their own mobilizer. If you're the tenant solidarity committee, you have your own mobilizer that you like actually nominate, and that's their like sole responsibility. So that's gone pretty well. And also, of course, we've always had texting tools and stuff like that to be able to, so I like people to text new members, to text existing members, etc. Like I get a DSA text probably like twice a week from somebody like pushing for something, like whether it's a specific committee meeting or just reminder of the general, or like a list of activities, etc. So we've still kept that apparatus going the whole time, which is nice, even though we've like made these changes. In terms of what we're going to do next, I mean, and I don't want to get into that part too much right now, but because we're kind of revisiting our committee structure and our chapter structure, because we think we were becoming a little too siloed. So I suspect that that's going to change the idea of having a mobilizer in every committee, because we're going to transition away from having too many committees that are like issue based and not talking to each other, because that worked for a while, but it's kind of getting disjointed now. So I don't know what we're going to do next, but yeah, at least having that texting infrastructure, I'm really impressed with my comrades that, in spite of all the changes that we've made and in spite of COVID, that they've like, that's one thing that's been, I think, consistent. Like, I can't think of a time in the last few years since we actually got it that I don't get 2 texts a week, at least from somebody in DSA.
Thank you, Shanti. Let's popcorn it to Jason.
Yeah, so really good question. I took a lot of notes here too, because I heard a lot of stuff I like. For new member orientations, we do 2 a month right now, where we have a mobilizer, thankfully. Basically, mobilizers are written into our bylaws, but unlike the other administrative committees, it's not like assigned a certain number of seats. Yeah, me too. It's not assigned a certain number of seats like Treasury or comms in our chapter. So we had just one person who volunteered to step up, who has been willing to just bottom line setting up new member orientations. And when people sign up, and I'm one of the spreadsheet nerds for my chapter, so I see a lot of this, but whenever we get new member lists, calling these people, inviting them to new member orientations, and just using that as a starting point, because our chapter is very bizarrely cut up, where after they've been through like an orientation where they know like what Central Connecticut's structure is, the next step is to invite them to either, if they, depending on where they live, obviously, like invite them to a branch, where we have branches in Middletown, Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport, or invite them to whatever interest working group that they have. Right now, housing justice, eco-socialism, political education, we have like standing socialist night schools on any topic people are willing to give and make a presentation on. And that's it for Medicare for all as well as another one. And before we really honed in on the branches as like our method of building a socialist organization, we really were struggling to like get people to some of these things. But when you can attach housing justice to talking to your neighbors about right to counsel, or building a tennis union, that becomes like a much easier branch building conversation too, because you can invite somebody, like say they live in Hartford, to the branch meeting where they can talk to people they live with. Of course, we're much smaller than a city, like, or we're much smaller in cities than we are like as a whole chapter. One city dominates like half our membership, New Haven, 250 out of like 530 now. So that's like definitely like an influence where they have like an organizing committee structure that is like trying to set up like deeper roots in New Haven with the existing membership base they have. But still, it's all working groups and people's interest committees. We have an Afro-Socialist committee that recently started due to our work in the Bridgeport abolition movement. That has also been really helpful in just trying to spur people to think about, like, if you want to get something done, just make a committee or about it, bring it to the rest of the chapter and see if people are interested. Having a Slack also helps. We introduced Slack to everybody during a new member orientation. We just have a walkthrough where we show people like how to, once you get in, like here's the auto channels you're loaded into. Peter also, I got to give Peter all the credit, Peter Kapucha. He will, after you do a new member orientation and you get invited to Slack, he will like add you to the channels you said that you were interested in. And then once you introduce yourself, the branch co-chairs take it from there. They let you know like, hey, we have a meeting here. This is our branch channel. Come to this meeting and then actually get involved. Considering like most of our like the Hartford branch is what I look to as our big success in this model, because they started from nothing. Like they had 2 steering committee representatives in March, and they both left despite not having had a meeting in like half a year. And we only recently elected 2 more recently, and they've had pretty good success. They have about like 20 active members, I think, people coming to meetings and also doing this housing organizing work that I am really proud of them for. Considering they all met online on Slack and like us trying to facilitate through like 1 billion onboarding calls, like I'm pretty proud of like how far they've come. But yeah, I think a lot of it's just based on how we can get everybody online and talking to each other, and then talking in person is the next step, the actual step.